Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili, Gianarakos. Vasili, welcome back for another episode, buddy. How you doing?
Doing good, buddy. Hope you're having a good week so far. We're almost there, almost at the weekend, so that's great for everybody. For the Flyers' perspective, just to start out, it's been pretty interesting. Preseason's already over, which is kind of crazy because I've never seen a preseason, I think, stranded out like that, where, it's already done. There's 8, days left all the way until the regular season starts, so it's kind of weird. They went 1-4-1. So I think there's a lot to talk about there, and we'll dive into that. We got a great guest this week, Steve Kournianos, the draft analyst himself, on to talk about what's going on in Flyerland and even some draft talk too. So it's going to be a fun one, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Vasili. And obviously, welcome to the show, Steve. Thanks for coming back to the show, buddy. Appreciate it. Good to have you, man. For those who are not aware, Steve is doing his off-season episodes, pretty much rolling through every single team in the NHL. No, he is not pretty much. Definitely make sure to check out the Draft Analyst podcast. If you guys haven't heard it, we also have older episodes with him. Draft specialist, New Yorker, but Midwesterner, kind of, at this point.
Southeasterner, I think.
Southeasterner, sorry. Yeah. But all around, man. And honestly, happy to have you back. And we're obviously going to be super focused on the Flyers. And then at the end, I think we'll talk some draft stuff a little early, but with how depressed everybody is, Vasili and I have been talking about quite a bit. You were quite appropriate to come at the beginning of the season. So thanks for joining us, man.
No problem. Pleasure, Vasili, Yariv, always fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We were talking about it. Even before we started recording, we were already going off on topic. So let's go off with this because we're kind of getting started already. But let's go topic number one. We haven't really talked to you for a little bit. We kind of brought you back here. The Flyers finally had their off season. We literally just ended the preseason. Like Vasili gave great wrap up there at the beginning, right? Flyers finished with a losing record. What do you think of the off season? What do you think of where they stand so far? And then we'll dig into specific topics from there.
It was busy. That's a good thing, considering the season that they had. It was terrible. It was one of the worst in franchise history. And the moves that they made, beginning with the coach and then the acquiring D'Angelo, it wasn't like wholesale changes, but things like that, they usually take time. So I'm expecting, obviously, this past off season and also this upcoming trade deadline, and it's kind of going to be the tone of this podcast, and then in the off season as well, where they have additional time. So I think it's similar to what's going on in Montreal, similar to what's going on in Vancouver, like new regime change. You still have Fletcher, but he's only been in the job a couple of years. But now you're bringing in Torts, and I think Torts is one of those few coaches that can change the identity of a team without really needing any help from the GM. He could just get players to buy in, and whether they like him or not, it's not the point. But yeah, we have to keep an eye on the first 15, 20 games of the season to see, because we didn't really see it as much in the preseason. But we have to look for the trends that plagued the team last year, right? What plagued them last year? Couldn't hold on to a lead, never had a lead, not coming up big in clutch moments, goaltending, injuries, health. And so you want to see goal scoring. I think they were like second to last in the league, which is crazy to think when you look at that lineup. So that's what I'm going to be looking at. And I wouldn't call it a rebuild just yet, but it's going to start looking more and more like one, I think.
Yeah, I think you said it well there. So you want to add to thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say just kind of jumping off what Steve said, and I've been saying it. And we've seen a little bit of the change throughout the preseason, though I don't put a lot of stock in the preseason game just because, there's already injuries. Not a lot of the regular guys are in the lineup, to be honest. So you got to account for that. But what it is, last season, the Flyers were abysmal. Once one thing went wrong, they would pretty much let it all unravel for them. And I think the coaching staff has even brought that up, that's something where the mentality, the confidence in themselves, the team just needs to become mentally tougher. I think Tortorella will help with that aspect. It's an interesting thing just for me, because if you look at it really, like in hockey, there's ebbs and flows to a game. You can't just let one goal in a certain period let the rest of the game get carried away, and one mistake is gonna, do you in, right? So that's the mentality the team's been having lately in the past 2 seasons, I would say. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out through the first 20 games. I think if we see them kind of fall into those old habits, or if we see them, build upon new habits and bounce back. Like last night in the Islander game, they ended up going down. They came back and responded. That's obviously good to see. They lose the game in overtime, which isn't the outcome they're looking for, but they did show some resiliency, which probably was not there for the past 2 years, I would say. So
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys touched on like all the great points. And this is the one thing I was thinking about as I see Torts. And obviously, Steve, you're very familiar with Torts over the years. And, the one thing I can
personally, we play badminton with each other every weekend.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He's an old buddy, an old war buddy of mine.
That'd be hilarious. So just what I'm seeing from Torts, okay, the one thing I noticed in all his interviews, he keeps talking about how he's coaching the mind, right?
Yeah.
So what he's trying to do is he's trying to build something that is resilient, to pretty much whatever is thrown at it. And I say at it because we can talk about a person, but we talk about a team. He's building something. He's trying to build callus around here, right? So the way I kind of see it, this is the first time I think Philadelphia has really seen this. I noticed this. I even heard a comment during the last game with like, oh, this is the first time, you really see a home team with less starters than the away team. Like that was not because of injuries. Some of these guys would have probably played in the past in the preseason. I really don't believe that Torts at any point in the season put together a lineup in which he thought that was the best lineup to win the game. I don't think he was interested in that at all. I think what he was interested in was situational play. I think he was interested in saying, hey, Owen Tippett, what happens if you're the only guy in the game who can score? How are you going to react? How are you going to react, Hayes, when you're the only center who can compete against the team's other best players? York, what do you react if I put you in every situation in the game? I want to put you at PK, power play, everything. Ersan, I want you to play the whole game, back-to-back nights. And between that, I'm actually going to overskate you. I'm not going to do what I would do to you during the season when I give you the day off. I'm going to overskate you because sometimes life gets hard. Sometimes your season gets harder than you anticipate, and you're going to want to quit. So I'm trying to build a mechanism in your brain right now where that doesn't exist. So somebody like Cam York, who comes in, probably did the normal thing he did, right? Pretty good athlete, but history of being a captain, potential top pairing defenseman. Torts is looking at it as like, man, I'd love to see if this guy could do it now. So let's raise the bar on him, demand a bunch of shit from him, see how he responds. And I think he's doing this in a different way to almost every single person. The reason he keeps talking about Kevin Hayes being the center of the group, he had that conversation one-on-one with him. Do you guys see those type of granular decisions made with each player that is not focused on winning? And I think it's why a lot of people are translating, and you guys touched on it already about the lineups not being whole, but I think it's intentional. I don't think it bothers him at all that they lost, and I look at his comments and they seem to follow that, where he goes, guys, they're tired. I'm not commenting on the performance. They were tired. Yeah, they played lousy, but they're tired. Like he knows. I don't know. Steve, I'll go to you first because you have a long history with Torts. What do you think about what I just said? And Vasili's heard me 1,000 times about this.
You see, the Ranger thing, though, he had an elite goalie to defer to. So all the motivational speeches and all the tactics and all the strategies that he wants to employ and play these games, it helps when you have a Henrik Lundqvist, right? So when Tom Rennie was a defense-oriented coach to a degree with star power up top. And then, he couldn't get it done because they couldn't score. So they bring in Tortorella mid-season. And that, what he did, though, in the end worked because he got them to the conference finals and he made them a 50-win team when they were just really kind of like mediocre. But I, as a fan, never got the impression that he was toxic, that he was bad for the locker room, that the players collectively were tuning him out. I never got that impression. If anything, we're like, and remember, he had to deal with the Avery situation. Avery came back to New York, freaking head case, weird bike messenger that he is right now, whatever he does. And he abuses bums, but living in like a $3 million apartment, by the way. But that was a big problem. It was a distraction. And he somehow, and there were young kids on that team. There were Stepans, there were McDonoughs, there were Girardis, like a lot of young
good players too. Yeah,
they flourished, not necessarily like on an all-star level, but they definitely flourished and they were peaking really at a very young age, and they were able to sustain that peak throughout. So like he built them up, and then they stayed that way while he was there, and then after he left. So I think he's great for the organization. It's just that, and what he's done in the preseason, like who cares about wins and losses? Yeah, you want to set you guys up for failure to see how they react to it and so on. And he wants to create the kind of culture where someone wants to make the team, not like I'd rather go to Lehigh Valley. It's easier down there. So I think it's Spartan-esque to a degree, not draconian, but something that's very tough. Like feelings don't really matter. Your feelings don't matter, and it's very difficult for a lot of people to hear that nowadays. So, but you got to win. You got to win some games. Like remember what I said in my podcast, you could say, hey, we're the best conditioned team. We could run laps around everybody. Yeah, but you also got to score and display skill and make key plays and key stops. So the rhetoric now sounds great. It's motivational. You're happy. He has a system, but got to win games, right? And I saw the crowd at the game yesterday was terrible for the last Flyers exhibition game. Used to have I would say
a full building.
Yeah, it'd be nuts, especially the years where they were contending. And now to see only just like little pockets. So again, this could be the beginning of a long process, but maybe Torts by himself shortens it a little bit by like a couple of years.
That would be nice. Vasili, you want to add?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say, just jumping off, Steve, like it's interesting for me with Tortorella. Like it just all seems like a calculated process. And there's calculation behind what he's saying, why he's saying it. Like we're saying though, like with the preseason stuff, like I think, there's obviously you want to see certain guys play well. You want to see certain younger guys impress because it's, pertinent for the team to actually get some of these younger players into NHL games so they can see what they have at that level, I think. But I think it's all an evaluative thing, really, especially with the preseason lineups, like you guys were saying, just looking at, okay, how can a certain guy handle this situation right now? And then evaluating, okay, we saw some things we liked, we saw some things we didn't. Can he translate that to the actual regular season? And there's some guys I think that we're kind of surprised about that might not actually be in the NHL coming up. And then there's certain guys that really impressed and actually might make a dent this season. So it'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have like a topic here about like young players. We're going to be talking about like nonstop young players the entire time. But the one thing I wanted to focus on, some of these mind games in the same breath, and we'll talk about York next, but in the same breath that York gets sent down, publicly, Tortorella praises Ronnie Attard, for stepping up to Johnson last night and fighting a bigger, Attard's a big kid, but he's new to the NHL.
Not on the level of Johnson.
Johnson. And Johnson started that whole thing. He caught Attard by surprise. It wasn't like he literally dropped his gloves and punched him before Attard was even really
and he's ready. Like, okay, I guess I'm in a fight.
Exactly. Yeah. So he held his own. He definitely held his own.
Yeah. And no, to you guys' point, he held his own, and Ronnie Attard has an amazing attitude that cannot be ignored. He's big, he's strong, he has NHL upside and all that. But he definitely stood up to somebody, and Torts praised that. He goes, how can I send him down after doing that? And again, in the same breath, he sends down York, and then he does that to Attard. Like, this is systematic. To some people, it might make them extremely uncomfortable to see, but he is doing it on purpose. And the same reason, and I brought this up on here, and people keep saying, like, coming with definitive timelines on, like, the Flyers won't have a captain. Flyers, he's saying there won't be a captain. He said he won't pick a captain. That is not what he's saying. He's saying that there is a captain that pops out of the ground like a goddamn daisy. That is what happens under these times. He should be able to recognize who the captain is. He's named some people he expects to stand up, and if he sees it, he'll throw a goddamn letter on their jersey. But again, it's supposed to be a natural process under very uncomfortable conditions, right? And Steve,
absolutely.
So you're ex-military, right? Can I say that on here to some degree?
Yeah. And his son's isn't towards his son, and like he's a Ranger, 82nd Airborne.
He's in the military in some capacity.
Yeah. He even referred to his son as a leader of men. Like, I'm just saying, like, I understand this human. I've worked with people like him. In fact, I'm a little bit like him. I understand what he's doing. He does this to himself. Yeah. I guarantee he does this to himself. This is a growth mindset, self-improvement tactic. That's what it is. It's not comfortable. I don't know if it'll work. Like you said, Steve, it's not 100% will work, but I understand it at least.
Not every guy's gonna I think.
Yeah, and that's part of
it, right?
That's part of it too. Yeah. It's like, you have to you basically establish a new standard. And by establishing a new standard, you explain to everybody, hey, this is the standard. This is how we're going to do things around here. And a zillion areas, right? And specific to hockey, on ice tactics, set plays, all three zones. This is how we do. This is how we carry ourselves in the locker room. This is how we carry ourselves to the media. Like it's a massive shift. And so change, comfort zone. We talk about prospects in their comfort zones that, you're the king in Rimouski, but then you go to the NHL, a different story now. So it's the same thing. Like you have NHL players and veterans who are in a comfort zone, not necessarily a clubhouse. I don't like that word. Sometimes got thrown around a little bit, but that, it was
too complacent.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of high paid players as well, not producing. So there's finger pointing, and you needed a guy to come here like, hey, it's about, the collective. It's not about just you. Let's fix things. And so they're saying the right things right now. I saw solid defensive structure the last two games, specifically standing up at the line, stick on puck. That is a Torts 101. So he talks about forechecking everything, stacking the line, stick on puck. Man, there's so many videos of him on YouTube, him saying that, whether it be with Vancouver or the Rangers or Columbus. And watching him is how it helps me watch the freaking prospects. Because I'm like, okay, that's a way, and it's effective. It's effective in slowing down the rush. Yeah. It's effective as, you create the chip and chase, and then now it's a foot race, right? Well, the Flyers actually have defensemen who could skate. That's one thing that they do have. So although they might not be overly physical, Torts by himself could implement, and Vigneault was not a stack the line, stick on puck kind of guy at all. And so I'm noticing that in the preseason. The effectiveness improved too over the course of the schedule. So, that's just, it's the motivational thing is great, but tactically, I think he's okay. He's pretty good.
Yeah, he knows the game for sure, 100%.
Yeah, now are the Flyers going to be receptive to it? Hopefully they are. I think that players are going to be upset when they get cut. They want to be a part of this rebuild when they succeed. So there's some positives to take out of this. Absolutely.
Totally. And here's the one thing I say to everybody who, I'm sorry, Vasili, did you want to add something there?
No, that's okay.
Okay. Here's the one thing I say to everybody about York. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, he's broke. This happens every time. I don't know. Rinse, repeat. The one thing people have to realize, but one, this is not your roster for the rest of the season, ever. It's almost never the case. Two, there is a bit of roster management in this that nobody really wants to talk about, the amount of defensemen and the fact that he is waiver exempt. It's easy to do this to him. You can do it to him. You can't do it as easier to the other guys. So they can afford to give him a lesson, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that plays a part, and that shows he is a prospect. It's part of this process. But here's the other thing. We should get used to this happening to a lot more guys, and then periodically coming in and out. They're going to have to manage a lot of these young guys throughout the season. Yeah. And there's a lot of injuries and still a large LTIR that needs to go for Ellis, which they have to be compliant.
$8 million. They're over the cap. So
yeah.
But they'll be fine. They'll be fine on it by opening night.
Oh, right. Yeah, for sure.
And that's the thing. There's going to be a little bit of weirdness. There's going to be a lot of this stuff. But what we should be looking for is progress. And with somebody like York, I look at I keep seeing everybody say like, oh, why isn't he playing like PK power play? And I was kind of looking at the lineup, over who? Like, is he really going to play the power play over D'Angelo, Provorov, Sanheim? Like maybe. That's the problem. It's a maybe. And then you have PK. Is he going to play over Braun? Pretty much anybody I named, Risto, right? Like probably, maybe, probably not. And it's like at that point, now he is playing 13 minutes a night. Is it worth it? Like I said, it's his kind of a luxury. He looked pretty distraught by it, but it might actually end up being the best decision for him regardless. Do you guys see that? And I don't know, Steve or whoever.
Yeah. I think with York, I mean, just for the preseason, the way he played, it's not like he looked amazing or anything like that, right? Like there were certain points where he looked underwhelming, and that's, I think, a factor into it as well. Like they challenged him. They said, there's a lot there. We want to see it. And what happened after the challenge? I mean, he came out in that last preseason game. He had a bad one-on-one on the power play. He got put out there. Zizekas beats him on the puck battle one-on-one and then scores a goal shorthanded. So, like, I feel, not to say that play specifically got him sent down, but there's obviously a lot of factors at play. But I would say, I mean, if that didn't happen, we could be having a different conversation because that's responding well to the challenge. Let's say if he has a great game last game, that's something for them to think about. Another thing is, especially with defensemen, and we were kind of talking about this off the air earlier, is that when you're only a 21-year-old defenseman in a league, hypothetically, like the NHL, it's not very often that a 21-year-old is going to make the NHL at this point defense and be an impact player on an every night basis. Like you have your guys that are one-offs, like a Cale Makar, Moritz Seider, guys that, are exceptional in that case. I don't know if Cam York's one of those guys, but that does not mean he's going to be a bad player just because he got sent down and had a bad camp, right? Like development's not linear. It's something that he could likely bounce back from, and they want to see his reaction to what happened. I think that's a big part of it too, because I think there's been a thing with York in terms of just the way he carries himself on the ice. He's a very calm player. You could sometimes mistake a calmness like that for being lackadaisical out there. Not saying that that's what they're doing, but it's definitely a possibility. And they want to see some more urgency to his game, which he, to be quite frank, he did not show. And if you're Tortorella preaching accountability, can you really give a spot to a guy who's 21 years old that got outplayed by, Adder, got outplayed by Zamula? Those guys earned it more than him, right? And they're young players as well. So I think that plays into it all. And there's just a lot of factors there with the York send down. But I think even Tortorella said this himself, like it's going to be fluid this season from Allentown, Lehigh Valley to the Flyers. Is going to be an open line of communication. I think we're going to see a lot of there's going to be a lot of players coming up and down. There's already a lot of injuries, so that plays into it. But what do you think, Steve?
Well, I think the only thing that I don't really like about the way it's been handled is you're publicly saying with, like that. You could just say we're setting him down. We thought he had a pretty good, okay camp. Say something like that. But to go say like to give a laundry list on one particular player, you don't need to do that. And Torts is you can't say well that's who Torts is. No, he's not. He goes to press conference. He says, "Hey, shut up! Don't talk to me," and then he walks out. So you know what I'm saying. So he could have bitten the bullet, but at the same time, you guys both, 100% correct that he's got time. They have options with him contractually. He's never played a full AHL season.
Exactly.
He split last season between Lehigh Valley and the Flyers, and because he spent most of the time in the second half, people like, oh, he'll be on the team next year. Well, again, the power play stunk last year. And they go out. It was the worst power play in the league. I think it was the worst power play in franchise history.
Yeah, it was.
So they go out and they get an outstanding power play quarterback. So now you're looking at a guy who's not going to play on the middle pairing. He's not going to play in the top pairing. So where are you going to put him? The bottom pairing. Well, look, take a number because there's a whole bunch of dudes who are older than he is, some with NHL experience. So it's just part of the process. If he's disappointed, fine. Let him be disappointed. Like I said, the only issue that I had was, you go kind of public with, your reasoning where sometimes you can just say, hey, you saw what I saw.
Yeah.
Do
you think Torts was that straightforward with him behind closed doors before he
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Okay. But I don't think he did it in a mean or abrasive way, like, you suck, kid, get better. Like, he definitely had like a.
I think it's the first time Cam York ever heard something like that.
Yeah,
that's
maybe.
Me, like he saw a ghost. That could
be, absolutely. But
that's why I like it.
Again, this is a situation where Tortorella's job, no matter what we say, the media says about rebuilding, his job, as cliche as it sounds, is to win the games. Yeah. So he has to put the best lineup out on the ice on opening night. And Vasili, like you said, that is not going to, that lineup you see on opening night ain't going to stay intact. No. Probably more than like 10 days, considering how tough their schedule is in the first half. So there'll be times where hey, Cam York, come join us and enjoy the sun. You know,
in my opinion, I think they truly believe that he's coming back. Look,
it's not like he's going towards ruining a child. Steve,
but I am well aware of how much you watch York. You know York. Look at his career. Has he ever been in any kind of position at any point in his career where he's been in a bad position? He's literally been on great teams the entire time, playing with great players. He's been a captain. Okay, let's throw some adversity his way. Like, that's kind of how, I mean, it could even be somewhat manufactured. Like, they could be extra hard on him to be like, he even said publicly, why wait? Let's do it now.
It's tough love. Much. That's it. It's tough. The Flyers have 8 billion defense prospects, right? Yeah, the fact that he's in this position and Yinning is in and Andrea, Wyatt Wiley, so on. The fact that he's in this position speaks volumes of his development.
Exactly.
That he's one of the last. He's going to be one of the last guys cut. Not a big deal. You go down to Lehigh Valley. You're going to be a number 2 or number 1. And you'll eat a ton of minutes. You'll run their power play over some pretty talented guys that are already down there, going to be down there.
Yep.
So again, this is just what happens when a team loses and you start pinning your hopes on the young kids and you get all worked up and excited about them making the team. And you tend to forget that they have an outside shot, and you should probably be, again, the job is to win games. You got season ticket holders. People pay a lot of money to go to that stadium or that arena. So, you have to put forth a decent product. So Torts will be flexible in that regard. Hey, two words, Chris Crider. Chris Crider, I don't know if you guys remember, he joined the Rangers during the 2012 Cup run.
Yeah.
When they conference finals run
was great starting out.
Yeah, and he scored big goals. The criticism was he's going to burn a year on his ELC. Who cares? He was scoring big goals in the playoffs right out of college. So expectation, we're like, 40-40 next year, 50-50, whatever it was. Yeah. Even 30-30 is like worst case scenario. He shows up, he's terrible. And he can't score. He's doing the turnovers, penalties after penalties. So they sent him down to Hartford, and he has a marginal season in the AHL. This was towards his last year in the as Rangers coach. But the next year, Vigneault comes in, but Crider explodes to a degree, and you can't tell me that Crider, if you asked him today, said, "Hey, the way the Torts handled you, the way that you went from the very high to the very low, and then back to the high again." Like, what was his role? And he'd probably say, Torts, like, and I'd
say there's a lot of players, Steve, like, that would probably say the same thing about Torts. I think Cam Atkinson kind of had the same sentiments for him in Columbus. They clash heads at the beginning. And then, when you hear Atkinson speak on Torts last season when he wasn't in the picture, he said, well, without him, I wouldn't be the player I am. And I mean, not to say that that's going to happen with Cam York, but it could be a learning lesson that changes the trajectory of his career. I mean, if he takes it in the way that they're hoping, right? So that's obviously what they hope for. And then back to, I think, an earlier point you kind of mentioned, Steve, just to kind of finish off on the York stuff, is that I think it's just about creating a standard even for the younger guys. Like, if you want to make the Flyers, if you want to be on the team, like, you have to make sure you show a certain level of competitiveness and you show a certain level of production and play in the preseason if you want to impress enough to make this type of team, right? So obviously, I mean, I think that's what they're trying to establish. Not to say that York's the guy that they're using kind of to do that, but I mean, it's a smart thing to do if you're looking to do that in your organization with one of your most highly coveted prospects. Look, even him who was picked in the first round, he's got to earn it too. We're not just going to give it to him because he's a first round pick. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we look at the you brought up the Casey Cizikas loss, that battle.
Yeah,
I don't think that's that big of a deal, to be honest with you. That one, I mean, it was bad. It was his fault.
Yeah.
To some degree, it was quite frankly, him and Grosnick let me down on that play. But
yeah, both not too good.
Yeah, neither one. But again, like, it's understandable to some degree. But I do think about that, like, if he is found to be some kind of vulnerability or weakness physically on this team, I mean, like, he is going to be exploited over and over again, like during the regular season. And last year, nobody had the book on him, really. He's a really good puck mover, but if he can be exploited physically, there's no point to rushing him in.
And I mean, he's 21 years old. He's not fully, I wouldn't say he's fully built out to any degree yet, right? So we also have to remember that, like, most of the time defensemen don't really start making an impact in the league till 24, 25, things like that.
Well, let's do a little bit of a devil advocate, because I do want to speak up for people who are frustrated for a little bit. The one thing I will say here, and it is important to note, is the reality is he is more talented than the other people who are, like, there is a noticeable difference. And even at times last year, Steve, I mean, I'm not sure how much you get to watch him on the Flyers like last season, but he was playing 22, 23 minutes a night and looking good. So this isn't a guy who doesn't have a history of doing that. So people were frustrated by that. I understand. But again, in my opinion, this is what we'll go back, and I think we all agree on this. They already see this in him. Like, they know he can do it. So if you're essentially heading in this season with the anticipation that, we need to win games, but I'm not expecting things to kind of come out the gate, flying. I'm expecting kind of, a little bit of a rocky start here. I want him to kind of build up confidence in the minors and then bring him into a team that hopefully is moving in the right direction at that point.
Yeah, progression.
It's not a development league in the NHL.
No. It's a tough league, and you get burned easy if you get exploited. So
yeah. And that's why I love Ivan Provorov, because no matter how many things get thrown this way, the guy is not, I mean, he has not wavered despite one little minor media thing. Like, that's been the
overblown too. Yeah,
completely overblown. And again, wearing an A, again, shocker. I thought he was a problem in the locker room. So somehow the new coaches didn't think that. Yeah, I hear same nonsense every just so you're aware, Steve. I complain about this nonstop. I like all the media people here. I like the bloggers. I like them all, but it's the same nonsense every year. It's like high school. It's like middle school. Eventually, we got to stop. It's like, you can't just pick a new target every year and, like, imagine that it's a problem. It's like, it's tiring. But let's get into the next topic. And the next topic is Owen Tippett. And we had a chance to interview him on here, talked a lot about his game. He seems to be right on pace. Finally scored a goal, had some scoring chances, nonstop scoring chances for Owen Tippett. And he has been used as a top scorer here in the preseason, obviously being
he's on the first line every game.
Right, exactly. Obviously being tested to that. I think they're pretty stead on him being on the right side. I'd like to see him on the left side, though, especially with Farabee situation in question. Steve, I want to open to you first, because I know you followed Tippett throughout the years, and Vasili and I have been talking to Tippett and, talked about him quite a bit. What do you think about Tippett? What do you think about his chances of not just being like a good player? Like, can he still be a top scorer in the league? Is he a 30-goal scorer in your mind? A lot of people are kind of relegating him to the 20-goal scorer range at this point. I think all the ranges are open. I just think he has to be in the right situation. I think he's at the age right now to kind of prove that.
All right. Well, first thing you have to consider is that he was drafted by Florida, and Florida, you draft him in 17. He was a first-round pick. Now you have to say, all right, well, where's the organization at? And Florida very quickly, with the new ownership there, they decided we're gonna start contending. We're gonna spend money on free agents and so on. And so that off the bat, although that worked for him, because he was able to go and play well in the minor leagues, and he had good showings in camps there. Like, he was considered the Panthers' top guy, or at least one of them, for several years. So when they decided to go for it, we've seen Florida's done this with everybody. They will overpay. right? So it wasn't like they had a kid who was blocked. They had a kid who, a kid who wasn't performing. They had a kid who was blocked. And they're like, do the kid a favor. That's what I think. That's how my interpretation of it was. And you watch him play this preseason. I mean, he's got the speed. He's got a ridiculous release. He's always had a great release.
Yeah.
But, I'm noticing that, Kevin Hayes had him open a bunch of times. And I'm not knocking Kevin Hayes, but, he fumbled the puck or he was inaccurate. So that showed me that Tippett is doing his job as a wing. Get open, get into the danger areas, find yourself, undetected. And he's also good at carrying the puck as well. So I like him. I think this is the best shot he's ever going to have, or at least up to this point in the NHL. And if you're being auditioned on a first line in preseason, then even if you don't make it, that still means you're an option. You know what I mean? Whether it be because, and again, I don't mean to rain on everybody's parade, but I think the Flyers are going to be very bad this year, and it's going to allow, much like last season, it's going to allow it'll allow younger players to play more, playing roles that they're not. Look at Morgan Frost. I mean, he's another one. He has such a strong preseason. He played in the top 6 role, and he acted like a top 6 center. So, it's another situation where I agree with the decision to try him out there, and he did well.
Is he somebody you think could benefit from that off wing type of shooter? Like they do.
He's got it. Well, he could shoot off the pass. He did a lot. He definitely did a lot in the AHL. He did a lot in with Mississauga in the OHL. I mean, that was his thing. He was set up in the circle, but he's more north-south though. He likes to stay in motion. Off the rush is how he seems to generate most of his chances, and that's when he's most noticeable. You know what I mean? Not that he isn't a bad shooter. It's just that, when I think Owen Tippett, I think of a guy skating in full flight and, just getting to that inside post before the defender. But yeah, it's a, expensive trade, right? Well, if you really think about it, considering who you traded for him, or he was involved in a trade. So I think he's so far so good. Like, he's looked good last year and looked good this year. So in preseason. So, we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's still, a young player, so you have to temper things on that end. Yeah. He's only played 115 games so far in the NHL. So people that are saying, oh, well, he's already a bust. It's his D+3 season, things like that. That's totally out of the window. Yeah, but that's
no, not at all. I mean, you look at his numbers in the AHL. Again, he had 2 very good camps for the Panthers, like young kid who's outplaying veterans. And so that in itself is to expect him to do that every year is not realistic. But just do that twice. It might have been, I think he had 3 camps where he was good. And I'm not talking about the prospect tournament. It's about the main camp. They just, it's just circumstance. And so, you call him a bust. I mean, he's got to start making some noise or more noise.
It's not linear. He's not going to be right into the league at 18, right? It's not like that for every guy, especially like you were saying, Steven, an organization like the Panthers, where they have so many guys in front of him that you have to beat out and they're looking to contend. I think now he's finally going to get the shot with the Flyers to get that power play time, get that. Yeah,
and he's always been a decent two-way. He's always been a decent two-way guy, so he's going to get doctorate level education with Torts on how to play off the puck as a forward. So again, he's going to be one of those guys that you by midseason might say, okay, we want to keep this guy and keep him as part of the organization as they move forward.
I think for sure. I just would say for the preseason, there was certain times where he had a lot of chances he wasn't scoring. That was a tendency. That was a tendency from last season, and people are saying, well, when's he going to get the finish, right? So you finally see him score a goal in the last game, which is a good thing. I think you see a lot of the times Hayes was really looking for him. They're trying to kind of boost his confidence. He's a young guy. Once you get one, they all kind of start going in, get on a roll. It's still a surprise in the NHL, especially. It's a hard league to score goals in. that's why goal scorers are streaky, because it's not easy. It's hard. So with a guy like Tippett, I just think, I mean, sky's the limit based on the opportunities, right? Like, he has the shot, the skating's there. Like, he has an aggressiveness. Like, he cuts in, and the way he cuts in front of guys to free up pucks is impressive for me. I think we just want to see, at least from my perspective, I just want them to try to open him up more on the power play. Like, he has a really good shot, but we haven't really seen them utilize it or feed it to him for those one-timers. I think they could benefit from that. So maybe as we kind of see the full lineup and the full first power play unit together with D'Angelo and his puck-moving ability, you kind of see that open up a bit, because just the power play units they've been running aren't really going to be what it's going to equate to in the regular season. What do you think, Yariv, on Tippett?
Yeah, I mean, no, for sure. For me, if we really want to turn him into a goal scorer, we got to fix our power play. I think our power play is still not there. I think you touched on it right there. I would love to see him just letting some shots rip.
Wire it.
Definitely one of the best shooters on the team. I don't know where Farabee is right now. That's kind of how I see it. I mean, I think you guys both kind of nailed it. I think sky's the limit for him still at this point, but he has to start burying shots this year if he wants to be, kind of that upper echelon goal scorer. He's got to show that he can do that. But I think bare minimum, he's a 20 goal scorer. It's the way that he plays. Sure. I think it's just the range just depends on him, how he finds his game. And I do think Flyers will probably start him in the middle six, I imagine, and try to move him up as the season goes on.
Personally, I want to see him with Frost. Sorry to cut you off, but I think they have they've had chemistry in the past. No. He's a good passer. Like,
that's actually exactly what I was going to say, because he's gonna most likely play with Frost. He's most likely a middle six guy at this point, right? Frost is in that very similar situation that Tippett is right now. And Steve, I mean, Frost, a lot of people are really hard on him still. I don't know what they're talking about. He's had a really good preseason. He's outplayed a lot of the other guys who are around his age. Even older than him.
Well, it's the same thing, Yariv. Everybody just thinks he hasn't done it yet, so he's a bust. You know what I mean?
I think it's just like a lack. I think it's a lack of perspective. A lot of times I really do. I think maybe it's just people get emotional and they just lack perspective. Like, let's roll into the Cates brothers, because I think this works completely. So first, just to point it out to those who are giving up on Frost or say Frost is on his last chance. And I know we've even referenced to the stuff that's kind of like it, but it really is not. The kid has just turned 23 years old. And for instance, Noah Cates is the exact same age, and everybody treats him like a prospect. So I think we have to recognize that it is a process for all of this. And the staff has brought up the fact Frost has lost an entire season to injury, which didn't happen.
That's a big deal.
The reality is you guys cannot like it. You can think it's an excuse. It doesn't matter. There are a lot of players in this system, and the Flyers' goal is to take every single one of them and make them the best player they can be. It's in their own self-interest to do that. If they can improve Frost, even trade him, you can get a lot more for him if he's a good asset rather than an asset that underachieved.
Yeah, exactly.
So no matter what, they're going to invest the amount of time necessary, and he's been good. I think already he looks great. Now, the Cates brothers, I think, are incredibly fascinating. I think Jackson Cates has surprised me with the progress he's shown over the season. I think he absolutely challenges still for a bottom six role on this team. When everybody's healthy, I think he does find himself out of the lineup. But I am surprised in how good he's been, and I do expect him to make the team at this point. Noah Cates, on the other hand, I think he was an NHL player last year. I think I'm very hesitant to assume a player is going to be a good NHL player because he has a good preseason. We've all been fooled before, but I tweeted about this earlier. Noah Cates has a Mike Richards-like anticipation. In every single play, he is never behind the play. He is always in the right position. He does not lose puck battles. He wins the puck battles. He has a pretty good shot. He's got pretty good hands. He is, in my opinion,
dream.
Well, he is exactly what you want in a complimentary top six forward. And I'm going to call him a top six forward. I don't care if that bothers anybody. He already has been able to score at the NHL level. We saw what Oscar Lindblom did when he was healthy before the cancer. I see a higher potential from this kid at this point because he just seems to be getting better and better every game. I don't want to get too excited about him because there's always like a caveat to the offensive production, but this is exactly the type of player you need to win a Stanley Cup. I I can't explain it other than that outside of he already plays like a veteran. And the last time I saw a guy who could play defense this well for the Flyers, his name was Sean Couturier. I'm not saying he's Sean Couturier. I don't think he necessarily plays to that level, but he has at least the ability to be successful in all situations.
He has tendencies of that.
He just has he has that high end two-way element, which
he's great hockey sense.
Yeah.
We haven't had a lot of that. And with what I can think is an offensive punch, when he's not the play driver, I think he can produce offensively. Steve, you watched both players develop over the years. How do you think about that? Do you agree that maybe Noah Cates' ceiling is higher? Jackson, I think, is kind of where he's supposed to be a little bit, but
more of a role player, I think.
Yeah. And it's fair. Listen, Jackson's a good penalty killer. He's definitely earned his stay in camp, whereas you might have thought before that he's going to be in Lehigh Valley, and he's probably still going to end up in Lehigh Valley. But Noah, I mean, listen, if he didn't play like this before, if he was like a guy that has to change his style because of a guy like Torts or LePerrier, well, like, hey, you need to become. I'm sure they tell him that, but he's always been this type of tenacious, in-your-face skill guy. So you have the combination of the tenacity and the combination of the decision-making. So you see him making plays off the cycle, making plays off the forecheck. He's confident carrying the puck inside the zone. You trust him. He makes heady plays. You see him make heady plays when double-teamed. So there's a lot to like. The enthusiasm is well placed. And so I think when I did my preseason lineup, I had Cates on the third line with Lawton and Tippett, with Lawton centering and Frost centering the veterans Atkinson and Van Riemsdyk. So, two guys that I think have been fantastic in camp. And, sometimes guys have fantastic camps. You're like, all right, that's great. You see you next year. You didn't like the team. And, it's like, oh, that stinks. But, with this, with those two guys, specifically with Cates, Noah, I think any coach would be like, holy cow, this kid's really freaking good. He sets the right example. So, it's if a guy like Cates makes people work harder, and then, by the way, you have Torts as the coach, even better, because now you have the power, I guess, maybe subconsciously, or just to kind of instill that work ethic into others. That, like, all right, he's working harder than me. I guess maybe I should work that hard too.
Almost rubs off in a sense,
especially when the coach is rewarding it, and that's what Torts does. He'll like the hard workers. He will reward and then single out the lazy, and then single out the lazy ones. He's like, "Great job, you suck." You know what I mean? Hey, it's what he does. So I don't think we'll have that problem with Cates. I think he's just going to give you that consistent effort every shift.
Yeah, definitely. I think basically what you guys all said, I mean, there's not much more else to say really in terms of Noah Cates. He just is making the right plays on the ice in every circumstance. Like, I don't think I've seen the guy, make not a bad play, because that's, over exaggerating, but he doesn't make those big glaring mistakes that you usually see from a rookie. And I mean, that's why the coaches are ultimately going to love him, because you typically don't get that with a rookie, a guy who carries himself in the manner that he does on the ice. He's calm out there. He's making those right plays, and he just seems, at least on the forecheck for me, he's just all over it. He's creating turnovers, creating havoc. I think that's a lot of what was missing last season from the Flyers, especially in the offensive zone. They didn't have a lot of guys. Until he joined, they didn't have a lot of guys that were really good on the forecheck or freeing up immediately pucks. They won. He had no hesitation in doing that. And I mean, I think it was just a glimpse at the end of last season of what he could potentially do, and then obviously this preseason kind of lends over into that. I mean, he had 9 points in 16 games at the end of last season. So that's not anything to say that's not anything really to shake your head at, right?
No, it is half a point, over half a point a game is
his first taste in the NHL.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And again, like the fact that he followed that up with a strong camp. So maybe might be a little slump, to start the season. It's possible.
Especially with young guys.
But again, the effectiveness off the puck, like you said, like if you have a lead, you want to make life miserable for the other team.
And he does it.
Part of it is forechecking and just active stick like freaking mad. And that's what he does. So
I'll be honest with you. I would not be shocked if he's a top rookie conversations this year. Maybe not statistically, but that people notice his game and be like, oh, this is a guy who's playing against the best players in the other team. And I could see him being used in that role at some point.
Especially on the penalty kill.
I was about to say, if Sean Couturier is healthy, like that will be the top penalty kill unit. And, you know, I talk about Mike Richards. This team has not been effective offensively on the penalty kill for a very long time. I think somebody like Noah Cates is a guy who helps generate that type of offense.
Lawton too.
Yes,
we have Lawton, PK's been
Atkinson.
Better.
Right. Well, it has
been
preseason
anyway.
Again, in my opinion, those special teams, that's a coaching problem. Actually, I want to take a step here to talk about this. And Steve, I feel like you'll appreciate this. Something I talk about here all the time, that the main problem with the Flyers has not been talent. Like, yes, there hasn't been talent here to win a Stanley Cup, but there was better talent here. And all of a sudden, like, things were just falling apart. We had almost the exact same team, and it went from Eastern Conference Finals to bottom of the NHL. Our team wasn't well coached for whatever reason. Something fell apart here. And if you look at the preseason, and you brought it up yourself, Steve, there is never one point where this team had a real lineup, right? Where there was a full lineup, and yet you saw them get better as the season went on. And this is what I want people to focus on, is like, we should be a tough team to play against, regardless if we have talent or not.
Yeah, and regardless of the results. It might always be there, but the team is going to be harder to play against, I think, just naturally under a guy like Tortorella, right?
Yeah, you have to just keep morale has to stay high, but like when because there's going to be losing. It's a matter of it's just a personnel issue that although the Flyers do have a decent lineup on paper, the defense is suspect, and the goaltending in name they're fine, but you know it's leaky.
All question marks. It's all
you know, the ability to still carry forward in those circumstances where you're trailing early. You're going to trail early because you don't have that great. The goalie's not that great, but you will be better defensively. So maybe you'll limit the how often you're trailing, and little things like that. So to maintain the same level of intensity, the same level of competitiveness, no matter what their record is in the standings, they're all plays that play that way. And Torts is one of the guys that helps players play that way. So you'll see an to me, it's undoubted. It's undoubtedly the Flyers will finish with a better record than last year. They will like 25 wins.
They had 67 points, I think.
All right, no, that's terrible. They're gonna be a lot better, even though the conference is very difficult. But up to the point where they have to sell at the deadline, they might have a little bit of bump in the road. But overall, you know, I have a problem more with the GM and the moves that he's made. But now that you have the guy,
I think we all do, honestly, Steve.
Yeah. So, because you know, but it's important for Tortorella too, because he's got a reputation to protect. And if he comes in and he's rah-rah this, rah-rah that, and it's a disaster for a couple years, it's going to really hurt his reputation to a degree, at least. So he knows, and that's why I think he's so invested in this job, as he doesn't want, to be considered a failure, and he doesn't, I think he's genuine when he says he really wants, the city of Philadelphia to enjoy a winning hockey team. So
I think the goal for him is just get it back on the tracks, right? Because right now, that's where it was kind of straying the last two seasons. And I think this is just a year where, like, let's see what we have. Let's see the guys that can fit in the way I operate. And we'll go from there. If we have to move on from certain guys, we'll address that later, all that.
So let me say something to you, Steve. When you start a season, you start prospects, and we'll get into that at the end. Is there a part of you that gets excited for the process, for the beginning? Be like, oh, it's this season. Like I get to make my list again, top to bottom, like the process of getting to that final list, not the final list, but getting to it, even the very beginning, where you kind of start off with that blank piece of paper. I think that's how Tortorella sees this. That to him, the Stanley Cup and all that, great. He has one. Like, I think he sees this like, I get to fix a culture before I retire. Like, I think that's his prize here. And I think he's actually been pretty open about that. And that's all he talks about, quite frankly. Sorry, go ahead.
We all know that cities like Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, where if you turn things around and all you need to do is to have like one Cinderella run, you are embedded in that city's sports history, the annals of that city's accomplishments in pro sports. You're done, you're cemented. They'll always remember you if you helped rebuild an organization like the Flyers. So that's why like Mike Keenan is to me, at least, I could be wrong because I'm not from Philly, but to me,
everybody still mentions him.
Mike Keenan is bigger than Bobby Clark or Holmgren. Like, Keenan was looked at the guy that if you could pick any Flyers teams outside of the Cup winners, it was that Keenan coach team. And so, and Tortorella, he's got similarities with Keenan. Maybe not as manipulative and narcissistic, but still, I think he's embracing it. He's embracing it. Usually, when coaches say, "I'm so happy to be, I'm honored," they don't care. They probably like their wives, like, "Why'd you move me here?" and all this other stuff. But with Torts, I think that he's a Northeast guy. He's a Boston area guy, so. You look at, when he was in New York, we loved him. And it was only, we got mad that we lost in the second round to the Bruins, went to the Stanley Cup Finals. Like, go fire him. So yeah, he's good for the city. The media's going to love him. Unless you don't act like Larry Brooks, I guess. I think he has the horses to work with. I think that if it's not at the NHL level, they'll have guys down the farm and you'll see them develop into Torts favorites, let's say 2, 3, 4 years down the road, I think. So, don't be too down. It's just,
it is what it is, the process where they are pretty much.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think this is actually a perfect segue because, Torts right now has an amazing reputation with the media. He really can do no wrong right now, regardless of people who are confused. Love him. It's just we're so desperate for somebody like him right now. He's safe for a little bit. Somebody who's not safe, who I think unjustly, Tony D. We talked about it earlier. Look, the reality is he's a very talented hockey player. I find it very, very interesting. I do that everybody's saying like there's a lot of question marks about whether him and Provorov will get along, whether they can play together. Totally get it, why there are question marks. I find it very interesting that when Ryan Ellis was traded here, who is also a very fiery player, that there was not a single question mark about it at all. But for this guy, question mark after question mark after question mark after question mark.
Well, it's the past, right? That
it's self-inflicted, though. Like he did it to himself. So it's like, you could be a really scrappy, annoying, abrasive, borderline dirty player on the ice, right? And that's it. That's your reputation. So when you go into opposing ranks, they boo you because you're a prick on the ice, right? Sure. But when you add additional layers on top of that have nothing to do with hockey, right? And you just find yourself involved. It's like a child actor in Hollywood that they have all the talent. They're in the big show, but they're freaking smacking women around, doing drugs, crashing cars. And it's like, hey, it's pretty easy to be a successful child star and not screw up your life. There are a lot of examples. So what I'll never understand about D'Angelo is that the talent is immense, right? Yeah. And he could still be a pest, right? Or like a tough guy on the ice. But what he said and what he's done in the past, whether you agree with him or not, you think that he's justified, you think that he's wrong. What his dad said in the interview, people get brought up that anyway, the dad's like, oh, yeah, that's how we talk. Hey, I got news for you. I'm from New York City. Everybody talk that way. Okay. Everybody talked that way, okay? Black people called me the N-word a billion times, all the time. And so, like, what am I going to say? I'm not. No. Like, yeah, they were my friends. So, this is how people talked. So I understand that people are, we want to move forward. Absolutely. Let's move forward. If it's hurtful language, no more. But, again, like, it's just that baggage that he has centered on, some pretty significant events. Now, I'm not talking about like the incident with the in the Ontario League with Georgiev, like fist fighting a teammate. No bueno.
Wasn't Georgiev who, from what I understand, wasn't Georgiev who hit him?
Yes, but still, D'Angelo told him to make a save after he gave up an overtime winning goal. So, although he was right, you don't say that to the goalie. I don't think
I agree.
I don't think they were friends to begin with. I think they rubbed each other the wrong way anyway. So
and let me ask you this, and this is not an excuse for D'Angelo's behavior. It's not, because I agree with you. And I would hate that shit. If I was a coach, I definitely reprimand him for it. Here's the other thing, though. Georgiev, gone from New York. Was he well-liked in New York? It doesn't seem like he was that well-liked in New York.
No, not really, no.
Yeah. So in my opinion, it's like, is that kind of a wash at that point where it's like, they kind of pick sides, and the reason they pick sides because one of them was really divisive. And I'm okay with that. The one thing I'm not clear about is why the questioning of his game. Like, he literally has not had a single bad season in the NHL. Actually, if you really look at his stats, he's clearly one of the best offensive defensemen in the NHL, hands down.
It's the political stuff. It's the challenging fans. It's all like it's just
it's a black cloud. It's a black cloud.
Exactly. No matter what. Like Michael Vick, if Michael Vick opened up a mission somewhere in like South America and was feeding starving kids, and people would be like,
"That's mention the dog.
That's the dog killer. That's the dog killer." So again,
you get a certain, I think what it is once you get a certain reputation painted, it's hard to remove that perception from people's
There's
minds,
nothing,
right?
D'Angelo. The only, again, this is what I said. I think we talked about this before.
Yeah.
The only thing D'Angelo can do to shut people up is to score often, score in big moments, and produce points over the course of a full season.
And be quiet off the ice.
And everybody will shut up. And the problem with D'Angelo is he did that. He succeeded in doing that in New York, where so many hated him for his past. And then oh my God, he's good. We love him. And then he goes, he has a stupid podcast. He's talking about the January 6th. He's just shut up, dude. Just go and freaking.
I agree with that.
It's like, just shut up. Okay, no. Why would you have a podcast as a hot? We want to hear their voice. They have Twitter. That's enough.
Do it afterwards.
And that's when the Ranger fans are like, you know what? Okay, now we're split because he really was being a jerk. So if the Flyers stink this year and you see his defensive shortcomings, and he has them, it's just gonna pile on.
Can I ask you this? Can I ask you this about his defensive shortcomings? And I've talked about this quite a bit here, and and maybe I'm wrong about it, okay? But offensive defensemen are what they are.
Yes, not supposed to be a stalwart. Yeah.
Everybody complains that they're not the best defensively. Who are? I mean, like, I know Cale Makar is an exception. Like, this guy is a franchise caliber defenseman at this point. But even Erik Karlsson, he was pretty good defensively. He wasn't like amazing. He drove play. Same thing with Shane Gostisbehere. Freaking Mike Green. Like, go around the list of guys who are elite offensively. There is a trade-off. That's not
There's a need too, right? Both ways.
Well, if you want an offensive defenseman, that's what it comes with.
Yeah.
Unless you can find the 1% of the 1%.
I agree. It's overstated, but again, it's overstated. But remember that D'Angelo is a puck possession defenseman, right?
Yeah.
So he excels in the puck possession game. To excel in the puck possession game, like most offensive defensemen, you have to anticipate. You have to pick off passes. Yeah. You have to get to loose pucks before the other guys get to them, and so on. So in that regard, D'Angelo is very effective. All right. But as we saw in the playoffs, and as we've seen in previous tours of duty, whether it be with Tampa Bay or not Tampa Bay, Arizona and the Rangers, is that if it's a slogging match, if it's trench warfare, you're not going to really succeed with him in terms of, because he's a strong, scrappy guy. So it's not like he doesn't battle. He takes a lot of risks, untimely risks, and he's also undisciplined as well. So he'll take a bad penalty. So, that when we say defensive shortcomings, then people talk about he got the can open. Okay, that has, Chris Brown, it happened to him. It happens to others. With him, it's more about like, all right, we're winning by 2 goals. Do I really need to go and, like flee from the slot when the puck is wet and worked high to low, and let me go pressure the point? He does that sometimes. He did it. A lot of Carolina defensemen did that actually during that series that they lost. But so that's what it is with D'Angelo. But I agree. You want excitement. The freaking goals for 31st in the league. You need to fix that. The power play was one of the worst in franchise history. Or it was the worst in franchise history. Yeah, he's going to fix all that. He will, just by being there. He's good to increase the percentage by a couple of points. You take the defensive shortcomings, but if the Flyers find themselves in a situation where they have a must-win game and they're holding a 1-goal lead, kind of shorten his ice time a little bit. That's what I would do.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I think even their hope is probably that Provorov picks up some of the defensive shortcomings, because he might be a guy that's better in the defensive zone than a D'Angelo, for example. So they're hoping that kind of meshes. I mean, I personally think like people are saying, or a lot of media has been saying that there's a chance that pair might not work. I think it's way too early to tell. I think the hope is that
I think it's more likely to work than not.
You have a guy.
That's why I don't. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Why? I'm sorry to cut you off, but why? What evidence do you have that D'Angelo has not had chemistry with anyone?
Yeah, there's no evidence.
That's my point. I mean, what history do you have that this guy has not worked with a player?
Yeah, he's already had 2. He's already had 2 seasons with 2 different franchises in 2 different situations. One a rebuild, one a Stanley Cup contender, where he was the top scoring defenseman on the freaking team and among the top 10 in the league. So clearly he's doing something right. You know what I mean? Why? So another reason. I wouldn't doubt him. Absolutely not. He's gonna play a minute and a half on every power play. He's gonna play a minute and a half to 2 minutes of every freaking power play. So by that, if they score 13% of the time, that's still like 45 goals, 50 goals. He'll probably have a hand in 30. There's your 30 points right there, with 25 points that he gets every year in the power play. Yeah, and you figure he'll get 10, 15, 20 points on even strength, and there's a 45, 50 point season. So that's what you want. They didn't pay that much to get him anyway. So what's the big deal?
Especially when your power play is that bad and you can't really move the puck from your own zone up into the neutral zone, up into the offensive zone. He's going to help out with that. I just think too, like you have a guy in Provorov who his traits are similar to a Slavin, who just work with D'Angelo. Like for me, for anything, it points to it actually working. So I just think it's overblown in general with a lot of it. I mean, obviously the off ice stuff. There's certain things you don't want him to do there, but it is what it is. I mean, when you put that in the rear view on ice, I don't think there's anything that you can point to that shows that he's not going to have a good chance to succeed here. It might just be, I'm wondering if there is anything that crops up. It could just be you have a guy that's so fiery and torts, and then you have a guy like D'Angelo who's also fiery. How will they get along? That'll be an interesting thing, I think.
I think it's a nice compliment, honestly.
It could be, yeah.
If you think about, like, don't you think Torts would have called out Georgiev?
Yeah,
possibly.
I mean,
maybe that's why that happened in the locker rooms, because it wasn't enough of it to some degree. I don't know.
We're not there.
Listen, again, all he's got to do is just produce, and he will, because that's the type of play that he is. And once he produces, people will shut up. Outside of like a very small.
I agree. We saw with even Evander Kane this past season, right? One of the most complicated, awful PR seasons of any athlete in the world, and then by the end of it, he's breaking records, and everybody's.
And Edmonton doesn't care. Yeah, exactly.
He's got a contract, and everybody forgets.
If you ignore, social media more often than the average person, I guess it
doesn't exist.
It doesn't even exist. You know what I mean?
Amazing,
you also have to accept the fact that there's no age filter on social media either. So you can't say I just want to hear the opinions of the 9 to 11-year-old male fans. No, No offense, kids, but you got to pay your dues. Like some of us have been paying our dues for 25, 30, 40 years.
Idea.
And so like,
That's
you know, when you have to, you have to argue with people like, it's like arguing with my daughters. Like sometimes it's like, you realize that I'm going to win this argument, right? That there's really no point in arguing with me because I'm the parent and I will win the argument. That's it. And that's, you know, a tactic that is very successful in parenting. But it was very successful, highly successful. But it's the same thing with
notes.
when you criticize, when you beat a dead horse over the same thing. I think it just shows a complete lack of intellect. Like if you're going to always revert to the same thing over and over
That's
again.
That's what it is with D'Angelo, right? There's nobody, you can't give the guy the credit that he's
really, it's like it's the low hanging fruit. Like, oh, he's racist. Oh, he was minus one tonight. Oh, that racist. I hate him. Like, you know, this is what it is. Like it's mainstream now. It's cliche. So it's, you know, basically like it's the equivalent of freaking buying your sneakers at Payless, you know, in my opinion. No offense to people who buy the sneakers at Payless, but you know what I mean? So anyway.
Well, here's the biggest X factor to this season. If Tony D'Angelo is as good as I hope he can be offensively, and he can move that puck out of the zone, which we really need. You know, I know the comparisons of Provorov and Jacob Slavin. I get it. I get that Jacob Slavin is awesome. A few years ago, if you had asked me if I would have traded Slavin for Provorov, say absolutely not. I will hold on to Provorov 10 out of 10 times. And I still believe that the guy's ceiling is a true number one defenseman in this league. I am so hoping that Tortorella can bring that out of him, and that playing with somebody like D'Angelo, who is a fiery dude and has high expectations, so does Provorov. Like this is a guy who literally, from what I understand, was calling guys out in the locker room. The last guy we had to do was Jake Voracek, who's one of the leaders of this room. Like we need somebody who's going to hold a standard. Like if we can get Provorov back to where he is, it is the biggest X factor on this team. You know, obviously without Sean Couturier, and this has always been my theory. I've never really talked to you about this, Steve, and maybe we should take a little bit of time to talk about this. But, you know, I talk about what defines a core and all that stuff, but you're not going anywhere unless you have a number one defenseman, a number one center, and a competent goalie. You're not winning a Stanley Cup. It's never happening. It doesn't happen unless you have four amazing top twos, you know, three amazing top two guys, you know, usually you don't have that. So, like, it is so important that Provorov hits another level that I can't express how much more I would invest in him. And people are talking about trading him. And I'm like, but how often do you have a guy in his mid-20s with that type of potential? I think it's very crucial. I mean, so let me say this, Steve, because I've never talked about this to you about this. We had a podcast about this, and I've come up with a definition for a core, because everybody's like, oh, what's a core? What's a core? What's a core? And I kind of came up with it. And I think the fantasy, I remember we have talked about it. I think the fantasy draft represents that. They have their rules built around this type of strategy. To have a team that is competent and going to be successful in the playoffs, you must have certain things. And in my opinion, it's you must have a number one center. You need a second line center. You need two top wingers. You need a third line center. You need three top defensemen and a goalie. And if you look at the way that the expansion draft, it's usually 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goalie. You can hold on to your core. And if you look at the Flyers, they do have almost all of that filled in with Couturier out. It's a big question mark now. But if you lose a guy like Provorov and you don't have that number one guy, and you could say Sanheim is or York, you can throw out all these other guys. You don't have anybody else who can do it. So if he is immensely important to this team. Steve, I'll roll to you, and Vasili, please respond afterwards. What do you think about that and the importance?
I agree, and we saw that it was like 3 seasons ago where he was definitely. I remember I had him like 11th in my top 25 on the 25 or 16th, and I put like Hampus Lindholm ahead of him, and people, Flyers fans, went nuts. And I was like, I'm like, you know what, Provorov really did have that on ice general kind of a season, and they even made the playoffs. Right? I think they played Pittsburgh that year. I forgot, was that? Yeah. So, and I remember like we were talking about matching, like the strategy in the talk before the series was matching Provorov against Crosby's line and the challenges in that. And, you know, he can only do so much against a player like that. But so that was a level that he was at. he was at a level where he was a number one defenseman on a playoff team, and he was given the task of, matching up against Sidney Crosby. So that in itself is something that you keep pinned to his resume, and you say, okay, he's done this before, but history has shown that a number one defenseman can still act and look like a number one defenseman as the team regresses. Like, he was never part of the problem. And the problem with Provorov is that with the Flyers struggles, he's been part of the problem, right? He hasn't been that old Provorov. So this is a gamble, right? To hold, I agree, he's a very valuable asset. He's only 24, 25, 25, I think.
Yeah.
He's expensive. But you're putting him into the system that he's never had, or he hasn't had in the NHL. Yeah. Where the focus is the defense. The focus is sealing things up, shutting things down, and then counterattacking. He's never really been in that type of a system before. So he could skate. He still has the brain. He's still got the creativity. Whether they want to pay him with D'Angelo, we'll see how that works out. But I do agree. Yeah, like he could be a number one defenseman on several teams right now. You know what I mean? Like, if you trade him to any team, Provorov would automatically be the best defenseman on that team. So you could attribute all the ups and downs with just, being on a bad team, general, like, just malaise. That's like kind of, the franchise is going through right now.
I think just to jump off, sorry, Steve, but I think it's interesting just with the core thing and how you have to have a guy like, a number one defenseman, obviously, to be successful. So that's why it's so counterintuitive to move a guy like Provorov, because you've seen him do it before, obviously. Yeah. So the Flyers are saying, well, we've seen it before. Under these circumstances, we're now putting into place with Tortorella his defensive structure. We're hoping to get that back out of him, right? Obviously, yeah. So it should be interesting for sure. There, I'm just wondering with Provorov, like, you look at every season he's played, he's never had a defensive partner for more than one season. It's changed every season in his career so far. So, like, what does that do to a young guy? There's no stability there.
The coach is changing.
Yeah, and also the coaches too. He's already had Hackstall, then an interim in Scott Gordon, then Vigneault, then an interim in Mike Yeo, and now Tortorella. So that's 6 coaches, and basically a different coach for almost every year that he's played. So I think with a young guy like that, like, just getting some structure, like, he's not that young, obviously 25 years old, but still.
No, for this. Young for defenseman.
For a defenseman, it's young.
Yeah, exactly.
He's in his prime.
Yeah, he's in his prime. So, like,
you're
usually not going to.
And not to cut you off, because I know you know this, Vasili, but just to put it in perspective for people who are listening, how many of the guys are still trying to make the NHL and they're like 24 years old, and you guys are calling them prospects? They're like literally a year younger than Provorov.
Exactly. And he's been in the league since he was 18, so it just shows the talent level and the skill that he has in general. So just to make the point, it's just like there's so much left to be assessed there. And when you've been in a situation where it's been unstable, there hasn't been consistency with the coaches, consistency with the defensive pairs, and you've been on a bad team, it's hard to assess. I mean, not to make excuses, but I think they're looking for a bounce back year. If you see that, then you get some structure in the same coach in Tortorella. Maybe he can bring him to a new level. That's obviously what the Flyers are hoping, but we'll see how it unfolds. I mean, it could really go either way. Nonetheless, even if he doesn't become that bona fide number one guy, there's still nothing wrong with having a real good number two defenseman on your team who can play on the top pair still, right?
Timonen was a number 2 guy.
Yeah, and you needed him, right? So it works both ways there.
Yeah. So let's go to the second to last topic, and then I do want to get into draft stuff, but let's talk about goaltending for a second. Carter Hart hasn't played. We don't really have anything to comment. I mean, realistically, he probably was a little banged up, but they're probably just not bothering playing him.
Yeah,
that's
I
my
think with
guess.
A lot of guys, they're just being precautious. Like, there were so many injuries last season. They're like, it's the preseason.
Well, it goes to
guys
what
are
I
a
was
little
saying.
Banged up.
It goes to what I was saying earlier, right? He's not really trying to win. So when you're not trying to win, you're not really that interested. You're actually more curious in who your backup goaltender is rather than who your starting goaltender is. You already know Carter Hart's your starter, but you really want to know who can be your backup. We have 3 guys at camp. Sandstrom was, a guy kind of got thrown in because it's time. He's of age. You have Ersan, who's the guy outside of Kolosov, the Flyers' best prospect who's not in the NHL, call Hart what he is at this point, NHL starter. And then you have, oh my God, can you help me?
Fedotov?
No, the other. No, Grosnick.
Oh, Grosnick.
Everybody already forgets his name. Sorry, Grosnick. And then you have Grosnick, who's obviously the AHL vet, who has pretty average preseason so far. Sandstrom is injured, but to be honest with you guys, I look at Tortorella's recent comments where he goes, has Ersan even given up a goal this preseason? I'm pretty sure
57 saves on 60 shots, which is impressive for his age.
That's awesome. And to be honest with you, like, I don't see how Ersan isn't the backup. The only reason, like, I would imagine even if Sandstrom was healthy, Ersan still starts the season as the Flyers' goal. It really just depends on Hart. If Hart starts the season, Ersan is the starter in the Phantoms because, why sit him on the bench? Yeah. But it seems to me, from what I've seen from Samuel Ersan, and he's shown this before against men, I mean, the guy is kind of lights out and might be the backup we've been waiting for. I don't know. Either one of you
great.
Want to speak first? Go ahead.
He's been great. I mean, Ersan's an interesting case because drafted a couple of years ago and then was playing overseas. So last year was really his first shot in the North American game. I mean, he played in the SHL for Brynäs, played 42 games and had really good stats. He wasn't on the best team. They weren't that great, but I mean, he showed that he could play in a league amongst men. So he obviously could already handle like the level of competition, especially at the AHL level, which he showed last year, played well too down there in his first taste of North American hockey, essentially. So I think just if you look at his movements, he's very efficient. As a goaltender, he's always in a pretty good position. I mean, it's almost similar in a sense to Carter Hart. Carter Hart's very efficient in his movements. He's not a goalie that's over relying on athleticism and things along those lines. So if you look at Ersan, I think there's similarities there in his game. I just think a lot of his movements have been very efficient, great off the push-offs off the post. He almost made an incredible save in one of the other preseason games earlier where he was completely out of position and almost makes it all the way back and it just kind of trickles in. So it shows a level of the athleticism too. He's been great. I mean, he's outplayed Sandstrom, in my opinion. He's outplayed Grosnick. So if you're going with the accountability factor and if you earn it, you should get the spot. I mean, based on that, he should get the spot, in my opinion.
Steve, you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, health is a concern with him.
Yeah, with all of them.
Yeah, and I think that normally you'd be like, well, Grosnick and Sandstrom are like seasoned AHL guys. They played full seasons. Yeah, but freaking Ersan played, I think, 3 full seasons in the SHL.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was like the number one, and that team got pelted nightly. It wasn't
lots of shots. Yeah.
Yeah, so he could face a heavy workload. He was fine in his few games last year. Really, really good in the preseason, and you still have to wonder, like, seniority. Maybe they made some promises, and I think didn't Sandstrom have an injury too?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. So maybe like promises might have been made beforehand. But again, if the goal is to win hockey games, and it's gonna be a merit based process to form the roster, that you let him be the backup and see what happens. Remember, I'm convinced it was supposed to be or would have been Fedotov. If he was. So the idea of a youngster or a prospect or a rookie serving as backup was entertained automatically, and not whether it was that or Sandstrom. Like, we knew that Martin Jones he was traded or they let him go. I forgot which one.
They let him go. Yeah,
they let him go. Yeah. So you knew that you could sign whoever you want from the HL. So this is what competition is about. All right. In my opinion, and probably your opinion, you guys agree with me that Ersan won the competition. So what do you do? You know what I mean? Exactly. I just wouldn't be surprised if he's sent down, but I'd put, he's a big kid, play him, put him in, see what he can do. You're not going to crush him. He's never had a full season in the AHL. If he has like a Mike DiPietro moment and he gives up like 7 goals in his NHL debut, you send him back down.
No harm, exactly.
Yeah. I saw DiPietro, by the way, got cut again. Wow. Poor Canucks fans, they're like beside themselves. They don't know what to think about that guy. Like
I know he had a lot of potential, but it's not.
it was the next, he'll be challenging Demko one day. And well, listen, this what us fans, we fans do. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And
with goalies, it's so hard, man, to dissect. It's just you could have a guy that didn't have the biggest seasons as prospects come out of nowhere. I think
the Flyers situation in goal right now isn't that bad. I think that we definitely want Hart to turn it around, and we're pulling for maybe this type of system, this checking system or this suffocating system will help minimize the freaking high danger chances that he always faces. But beyond that, Fedotov, whatever, he's able to come back.
They have a good goalie pool, yeah.
Kolosov, and then you have these young guys, Sandstrom and Ursan, fighting for the backup position at the NHL. You know what I mean? So that's what when you draft them in 15 or 16 or 17, 18, whatever, that's what you want. And they stuck around. They paid their dues, and I think you can't go wrong with either guy. But if it's going to be based off of play, you give it to Ursan. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's funny, the irony, just because think about all the years the Flyers couldn't develop a goalie for anything, and now they're starting to develop all these goalies. Well, it's just hilarious.
Let's be honest. We know why it is. I mean, it's because we had a goaltender as a GM who made it a priority and drafted a bunch of them. And
there's
people
a process.
People don't want to talk about that, but that's
history too. The combination of that and history, though, but people know that when the Flyers have a franchise caliber goalies when they're at their best. And they tried to do the whole piecemeal thing in the dead cap, the dead puck era, and even thereafter. But this is I still think this is Hart's team, though. Yeah. I'd like to see him just have that Carey Price moment that he had with the Canadians, where it's like, all right, this is what we've been waiting for, and
he's the X factor.
Yeah, and so
I'm sorry to cut you off, Steve, but he is the only player that if he hits his high potential, let's just say he breaks out has a huge breakout year. I mean, you saw what happened to the Rangers. You talked about it a ton. I mean, that's how you take this team out of being like not really part of the conversation and being like, well, if Hart stands on his head, they're capable of doing he has overachieving, right? You can't always say that. Now, I will say Tortorella's system, if it does what it needs to do, we could see something like that, or at least
absolutely
beneficial to the goalies.
Yeah. Well, it's going to put the theory that it was Vigneault who played a big role in Carter Hart, I guess, struggling a little bit. It's going to put that theory to the test. I believe it, but to a degree, but that Hart definitely has to, he's at the age now. He's had enough experience. He's been through enough training camps.
Yep.
Where he knows that, hey, you know what? I got to start stealing some games from my boys, because that hasn't been the case, especially last year. I know, of course, there were injuries and everything, but I want to see the Flyers goalies, not just Hart, all of them, that you're going to be so scared of your coach yelling at you, or you're going to be disappointed in letting down your forwards and skate, or you're a defenseman, that you'll even fight through whatever adversity you're dealing with late in games. And it seemed like the Flyers in the last couple of years, Jay just found a way to collapse, and that included the goaltending, inopportune scoring, a poor decision making, bad penalties. Well, so, but again, I'm gonna side with Torts on this one and say, hey, listen, I think he's gonna find a way to stabilize Hart, restore confidence back in him again, and also not overwork him. Unless he says he's healthy and he's willing to play a lot. Yeah,
and I think it's there. I think it's there for the taking, and I think you can get this team to play well. I think this is I've said it before in here tons of times. Carter Hart is by far the best goaltender I have seen in a Flyers uniform. Definitely since Bob, but they have not had anybody like this. It was Steve Mason. Sorry, y'all. That was it. That was statistically the guy we had after all this time. And we had some back in the day, but realistically, we always had a mediocre goalie. This is one time where if we play right in front of this guy, we can turn him into a star. He doesn't have to just be an average goalie. Yeah. So let's get into the meat and potatoes here, and we'll end on this because this season is, like you said, We could
in flux, let's say.
Look, we could be at the very bottom of the NHL, and goddamn, is this a year to do it? I will say, if you're gonna be in the running for a top pick, this obviously seems like the year to do it. Steve, you don't have to go through everything. I don't know how final your lists are. Flyers
No.
could definitely be somewhere in that range. I mean, just give us, why don't you just start off? I'll tell you the one thing the Flyers obviously need is centers. I know we drafted Gauthier, but it is very clear that this team needs a top center in the system outside of Gauthier. We need somebody who can really carry the play down the middle. It seems to be there's a plethora of them available in this draft, but who are we looking at this year? And obviously, I think we all know the number one, but go ahead. I mean,
Connor Bedard. Well, first of all, just to get out of the way, it's a very deep draft for center iceman. It's a weak, thin draft for defensemen, maybe one of the weakest ones we've seen. So you're not going to see, like 6 to 8 defensemen in the first round. You might see 2 to 4. At least that's the way it's shaping out in the beginning. But so Bedard's the center. He's going to be the first overall pick, no matter what Michkov does. Michkov is a wing. They're both smaller guys, though. So Bedard is about like 5'9.5". Maybe they'll bump him up to 5'10". Michkov is about 5'9.5". And they're definitely two players who have smashed so many records at various ages. Like at 15 years old, they were leading like teams in scoring. At 16 years old, they were smashing World Junior records or World U18 Halinka records. Michkov averaged like a goal a game in the MHL. Bedard was the WHL Rookie of the Year. And these guys just been destroying and slaying for 2 years now, like against junior age draft eligible competition. Michkov got a hurt. He got banged in the knee in a dirty play by that idiot. What was his name? The defenseman for the Canadians, Yemelin. A dirty knee on knee hit. I think it was Yemelin. If it wasn't him, Alexei Yemelin. But I thought it was one of those weird ex-Canadian like early 2000s defensemen that were like dirty. Yeah. And then thereafter, though, it's a lot of wings and two-way wings and two-way centers. So if Torts is going to have a say in this draft, he's going to like a lot of these guys because Adam Fantilli, he's my number 3. He's like plays every shift like he's shot out of a cannon. He's got a great attitude. He's just insanely physical and energetic. But he's also like 6'3" and plays with a mean streak. So I think Michigan, he's a freshman in Michigan. I don't know if they played a game yet. And then after that, you have like a whole crew of skilled playmaking centers like Riley Height. He's a WHL kid. And Braden Yeager, who's a WHL kid. Zach Benson, although he can play center or wing. Leo Carlson, the big Swedish kid. There's so many kids that forwards that have succeeded against not men in Carlson's case, but also like 2-3 years ahead of their age group, that they've been the best player on the ice. So that's a good sign for teams that are picking in the lottery for when it comes to the draft. Like you're not going to have you only have like 1 or 2 defensemen, not a whole lot of goalies, although this draft will be deeper with goalies than last year's. This is about centers, forwards, wings, franchise potential, like cornerstone guys who are like the best player on their team in the postseason last year, even though they were the youngest kid. You get a lot of that. So if the Flyers are in a position where they have to sell and they're out of it and they are going to be in the running, if they get a top 3 pick, you're looking at just another franchise caliber player, but I think ahead of Gauthier now. And then here's the guy that you have that, and he might not be big. He might be like 5'10" or 5'11", but there's no rule that you have to be a certain size to be. Look at Matt Barzal. Exactly. He just got and people are like, well, look at his production, dude. He is the number 1 center of the Islanders. He is their 100%. Best play. He's the most dangerous threat. When you buy down the ticket, you're like, I want to see Matt Barzal more than anybody else on that team. With all due respect to guys like Pellick, who I like, and so on. That's what you'll get from this draft. Even if the Flyers, let's say, do improve, like we said, we think that they will, and they are like a 75-point team, and you're picking, 9 to 12 again, still. Daniel Boot, big physical, skilled winger out of Russia. Otto Stenberg is like a poor man's Peter Forsberg to me. The way he stick handles and he snipes it and just circles and cycles and pivots like round the clock, like you can't contain him, always shifting in every direction. And then the kid Saleh, the Czech kid who destroyed the U18 Halenka, and some say he's a top 3 pick. I have him somewhere in the 20s. I want to see what he does in the Czech Extra League this year. But yeah, forward heavy draft, plenty of centers from every major nation, and Flyers will end up with any pick they get. I think this year will be automatically their top prospect.
That's interesting. I think, at least for the draft, I mean, there's no telling if the Flyers are going to be, a top 3 like that. But like, if you get a guy, let's say, obviously like a better, that's the main goal that you would want if you're going to be so bad. But like even an Adam Fantilli, that guy immediately, like you were saying, becomes, the top prospect. And then you get, a combo, like say him and a Gauthier, then your center depth is kind of restored when it hasn't been the greatest. I think, if the Flyers are in the top 10 in any capacity, or even up to like 12, like you were saying, Steve, they might aim for center because that's kind of what they're looking to rebuild in terms of the depth. Obviously, best player available, all that factors in too, but I think they might aim for that. I'm just wondering, Steve, like, is the hype legitimate in terms of this draft? I know for so many years it's been hyped as one of the best draft classes that we've had in so long. Would you agree there for sure?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, because I saw Bedard and Michkov live. Right. Okay. So we track them. They've been tracked for a while now, as far back as like 11, 12 years old. Bedard was given exceptional status in the WHL. The WHL out of the 3 leagues, I think they've done it the least. So we knew that he was going to be special. We waited for him. He shows up on the international stage and he just destroys it. In the gold medal game against Russia, he just destroys it. 6'6" skill, top scores in the tournament, and then Michkov at the same time, head to head. You know what I mean? In a gold medal game, it was brilliant stuff. I will be able to say one day that I saw Connor Bedard and Matvei Michkov play in a gold medal game when they were freaking 16 or 15 years old.
Crazy.
At the U18 level. And the best part about it was I was so mad at that tournament because they were price gouging and charging like $20 a beer, and I was so angry. But that made it worth the trip. But that'll play into it, why I think it's a generational situation, because they've smashed records belonging to Crosby and McDavid and Ovechkin, right? To begin,
then you got to take notice, exactly.
Yeah, so you have to take notice, and then on top of that, they have not failed at delivering. So Michkov, he had the knee injury. He should have played in the KHL, but because of the knee injury, it delayed his season. They had to replace him, and the team is doing okay. So they sent him to the VHL, and he scores in his first game of the season, technically regular season game, maybe second or third. Maybe the injury happened I forgot if it was a preseason game or a regular season game, but nonetheless, he scores 3 goals in his first 2 games. So he had 4 points in 3 games in an adult league that no young prospects ever dominate. It usually takes them 2-3 years after they get drafted. So this has been now 3 years now. 3 years where these kids have lived up to the hype.
Yeah, surpassing expectations too, even.
Yeah, so just by those 2 guys alone, we're like generational draft, best we've seen in years, maybe better than one day is going to challenge 2015 and 2003 and 79 and so on. And so then you add to that, oh my God, wait, there's Leo Carlson, the kid who's been tearing up the SHL, and he's clearly like a man amongst men, although he's only a boy, he's only 17, and then the guys in the WHL. So the hype is real. The only blemish is that it's not loaded with defensemen, that you only have for real, like 3 or 4 defensemen who you would say that's the number 1 defenseman or number 2 defenseman in the NHL in a couple of years. And so, teams really like defensemen. They'll draft them. They'll overdraft them by 2-3 rounds sometimes. So, but that shouldn't be a problem this year. Whoever gets a defenseman, yeah, it'll probably be a need pick. But this is the center wing, once in a like blue moon. Definitely on par with 2019 that had Hughes and Kako. And then after that, though, Zegras and Boldy and Sider. Like that draft, we said it was going to be historic. It's looking historic already. So I would put this one on par with the potential to exceed it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty wild. Let me ask you something about Fantilli. I keep seeing that he challenges that Bedard and Michikov. That seems overblown, but I do look at the size, the aggression. What are we looking at here? Is this a guy who normally probably would have been a first overall pick and literally just behind two generational talents?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, the ranking of anyone, people want to rank Fantilli ahead of Michkov. That just want to say, by the way, that all started after the Ukraine thing started. Course, what a shock.
That switches the perception, of course.
Well, let's punish the Russian kid because I'm mad at them. But anyway, no. So it's fair, though, because Fantilli is a fantastic player. He's so much fun to watch. He could be a little bit out of control sometimes, but you want to talk about a 6'3" kid who could skate, like really skate, and he's a menace. And then once he gets the puck, he does a ton of things with it, whether it be stick handling, passing, shooting. So he just destroyed the USHL in his draft -2 and draft -1 seasons. So his draft year, he's going to be at Michigan. I can't see why he's not going to be one of their top players, maybe even their top scorer. There's a lot of talent there. So, but even the guys, like I said, thereafter. So yeah, it's, if you want to go for the more physical guy over Michkov, but Michkov's no pushover. He's tough. He's a competitor. He's got a ridiculous low center of gravity. Like he is immovable. When he's shifty and he's controlling the puck, you can't move him from the net. Imagine a 6'3" defenseman not be able to move a 5'9" kid in front of the net. But that's what he did in the KHL. And that's what he does in the VHL. Very he's a bulldog. So that's why if he was like a timid
flyer,
if he was like a timid. But the thing is, the skill is through the roof, and not just goal scoring, the playmaking, the vision, his hockey sense, anticipation. This guy scored a goal a game in pretty much every level he's ever played in. You know what I mean? Against adults, it's always a goal against. Like every game, you're going to get 1 or 2 goals and 6 to 12 shots every game. That they try to mark him. I saw the final last year where they try to shadow him with a really good defenseman in Grudinin, and even the Grudinin did a pretty good job. He still scored like 6 goals in the final series. It's mind blowing, and people just I don't think they want to believe it. But all you got to do is watch him play one game, and you're like, okay, I see it now. And that's why I think that he's on the contract in Russia though. The word is that his family was in need of the money, and so he signed a long-term deal with SKA, a pretty hefty one too, all things considered. And they had him for 6 years, but this was signed 2 years ago. So I think he's got 3 after the season. He's got 3 more years in Russia, and there's no transfer agreement. So it's the prospect is I'll draft Fantilli, because I know he'll be in my lineup in at least 2 years.
Yeah, that's the caveat almost.
But what's the flip side to that? 2 words.
He might be generational, exactly.
Kirill freaking Kaprizov, right? Like talk about worth the wait.
Yeah.
So you're going to tell an NHL GM, hey, if you wait 4 years, man, you're going to get 95 points every year. You know what I mean? How do you
turn down? Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So it's a great
draft. Interesting.
It's going to be in Nashville this year too. It's going to be a fun atmosphere.
We're hoping to get out for that one, Steve.
Oh
so
man,
if we do. We'll have to.
Downtown's buzzing, and it just because of the preseason.
Yeah,
buzzing here the last couple of days, and football and everything is packed in together. So you walk out the arena and it's a party, like automatic party that lasts all night. But yeah, it's worth paying attention to from a flyer standpoint, from a long-term development standpoint. That
they could use a guy like that for sure. That we were talking about.
Let's be realistic here. Let's be honest. If they win the Bedard sweepstakes, they're comparing him to Lindros. They're going to say this is the best we've got the best prospect we've had since
100%.
And remember that.
It will
say
be.
again?
Wouldn't it be true though? I mean,
absolutely. I mean, it really Crosby, McDavid, Bedard, and then before that, Lindros. Joe, with all due respect to Joe Thornton, and
no, it was Lindros.
Not on the same level as a Lindros.
Lindros took over everything for 2.5 years. Everything was about almost 3. Everything was about that kid. Same thing with Crosby. And Bedard, listen, guys, like I'm covering the damn sport. I'm covering the damn draft. Like for me to talk about a draft -2 kid, I don't talk about draft -2 kids. I'm like, yeah, see you in 2 years. All right. I've been talking about this kid now, and many others, included, nonstop in my head. I can't stop thinking about this kid, Michkov as well.
What about Bedard's game? Because I thought you broke down Michkov, and I to make it very clear, I definitely would go for Michkov if I have the number 2 pick. But what about Bedard's game makes him so special?
The sixth sense, I mean, the shot is beyond the league.
He knows where people are on the ice.
He uses a long stick. I don't want to say he's got a banana blade, but the velocity that he generates on his wrist shot, it is, and he's not, like I said, not a big guy, but he's strong and he's tough. But just the technique, the like a little backswing, it's just a brilliant shooter. But he's also a brilliant playmaker. I mean, so the skating is very deceptive. He has like 2 or 3 hidden gears. So you think you might contain him. He likes to move slowly, methodical, control the puck, survey things, and then he'll flick a switch, chip the puck in, and now he's won the foot race. And once he gets it, you're talking about no look, facing the boards from behind the net, through the legs, backhand centering feeds into an empty net.
That's special, man. That's like, you don't have to say Gretzky level or things like that, but just the wherewithal to know where guys are.
Like insane vision.
When you can't even see them.
Like he's going to go, he'll be in a foot race for a puck in the corner, right? And the defenseman and the opposing coach and the goalie have to realize that he will make a pinpoint centering pass off a 50-50 battle. Like it's not like there's a loose puck and he's going to get to it and no one's covering him. Like he'll go into the corner with you, he'll lift your stick, and then in one motion, no look, blind backhand pass in the back of the net. The nasty backhander. He scored a brilliant goal. The back-breaking goal in that gold medal game. On the backhand, it was like a backhand breakaway, and he shifted his entire body weight and literally wristed, like, well, not but like you would like a I don't even know what the term would be, like a backhand wrist shot.
Backhand snapper almost, yeah. But
it wasn't even a snap. It wasn't a snap. It was like, he dragged it on his blade, and it was a bullet, top shelf. And you're on YouTube, you could see it. He is, again, we're talking like now, 5 minutes now? You see how excited I am? Like, it's a big deal. So maybe if the Flyers don't want to do that well this year,
it might be the year. Just
wear the brown bags, boo, throw cups on the ice and do whatever. But that's all going to be forgotten. If you win the lottery and you're getting the first or second overall pick,
Yeah.
It would be very good for the sport of hockey if the Philadelphia Flyers did get Connor Bedard. I'm being completely honest. I mean, you can send him to Arizona. Okay. Chicago's there too. I mean,
that'll be good.
I think Chicago's all in on Chicago. Arizona has a responsibility to finally do something. You know what I mean? Yeah. And even though that they're still selling, and now they're probably going to trade Chikrin, but the Blackhawks and their new GM, they're like, goodbye. We're trading everybody, indiscriminately deconstructing the roster. Like, we'll take Peter Mrazek. He'll be our number one goalie. He'll be our number one goalie. So but we're not tanking, though. Yeah, Peter Mrazek's our number one goalie, but we're not tanking. Yeah. No offense to Peter Mrazek, but go kind of.
Let's be real. If Peter Mrazek's your number one goalie, that means probably somebody else is going to be your number one goalie. How funny would it be?
Mrazek has like a freaking Jose Theodore season.
And he just gets...
He's like,
they'll trade him immediately. They'll trade him early in the year.
And the Leafs,
get out of here.
The Leafs losing the first round again, but freaking
to Mrazek and the
leads the
Blackhawks.
Blackhawks to the play.
They lose to the Blackhawks in the final. No, I hear you. Or maybe the Blackhawks will trade Mrazek. You know, it's funny. When the Leafs went for Mrazek at the time, I was like, wow, that is a puzzling. I guess they did it again. You know, good
he was useless. He could not stay. He was arguably one of the worst. Healthy. He couldn't stay healthy, and
when he was healthy, he wasn't good. He's an undisciplined goaltender.
He's. I mean, listen, he is a very good backup in the NHL. Okay, he's a good, solid, serviceable backup.
Can't be your starter though.
25 games a year. Okay, you cannot play him 55, 60 games. It's just not in him. Like he just has these. You know what I mean? And
lapses.
Yeah, and so, but the race for Bedard is going to, and I mentioned this in the Ranger podcast I did last night, that what I think you're going to have is you're going to have 3 insane developments around the trade deadline, right? Simultaneously, where usually it's just like you have the contenders, the bubble teams pretenders, right? And then the downtrodden. And so we know who they are and everything. And it's like standard operating procedure, right? The good teams will trade first round picks to get the rentals to help beef up their depth. The teams who suck are willing to shed salary and acquire draft picks. And the teams in the middle, it's 50-50. Which way are we going to go? Maybe we'll make one move and sell one guy and then acquire another guy, whatever.
I think they may be more hesitant, the teams in the middle.
This year, it's going to be completely different because you're going to have the standard situation with the contenders looking to poach the bad teams and get some rentals and beef up for cup runs. But you have all these teams in the middle who did not make the playoffs last year, who think they're good enough to make the playoffs this year. And ownership is telling them, you better make the playoffs this year. New Jersey, Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, Columbus. They're in, and I'm just talking about the Eastern Conference now. Yeah. So they're going to be in a position where you might have teams who are going to end up in the lottery anyway be buyers at the deadline because ownership is saying, hey, we have and they also all have elite prospect pools, those teams. So it's not like they need, picks and prospects to shed salary. Like they want the playoffs. And then the third development are the teams selling for Bedard to have the worst record in the league. And you're going to start seeing teams, I think, as early as maybe even, after the freeze. So January.
Starting to sell off.
There'll be at least one team who's like, let's set the market.
It makes sense though, because when you have a generational talent like that, like
it's going to be nuts.
Every team,
I guarantee it. It's going to be nuts. The Bedard thing will be. It's going to intensify. Look at what the Shane Wright-Slavkovsky thing. Montreal, the Bedard Mitchkov thing, even just Bedard by himself, especially if you have a Canadian team of 2, not in the playoff picture, that it's going to be the number one story. Unless you have a Canadian team in the conference finals or Stanley Cup final, the entire offseason, really starting in around the lottery though, but then. It's going to be nothing but Bedard talk. So, I'm just psyched. It's going to
be crazy to watch.
Yeah.
It would be one of the coolest moments ever if he ended up here in the Flyers. For me personally, I've never experienced that. I missed the Lindros era there.
I wasn't born, so yeah.
I was speaking.
It was. Wait, so you neither of you experienced Legion of Doom?
Well, he was too young.
I was like 3 years old when they were in the peak. So
I was a kid. I saw Lindros at the end of the era. I saw like when he got hurt and everything. I got
the 95 season, the 95 to 97 seasons though. That
insane,
was the city was nuts. The city was nuts, absolutely nuts about that team. And I felt bad. So many friends I knew that were Flyers fans. They were like crying or when they inside. I was psyched because the Flyers beat the Rangers to get there, but the city completely. The Phillies were like mediocre, right? In the mid '90s, they had after '93, but they like '95, '6, '7. The Phillies weren't all that great. I think the Eagles. This was pre McNabb, post. It was post
right before. Yeah. Yep.
So they weren't. If I could recall correctly, they weren't really a player. And then
The Flyer season, really.
the 76ers had Iverson.
Just got
but
him,
it was 96, 97. But the 94-5 Flyers, that team just took over everything in Philadelphia. And they were painting statues, everything. Everything was Legion of Doom. And Lindros went in the heart. He was crying at the ceremony. It was like, he lived up to all the expectations.
Well, yeah.
And then some beyond. And he was even like a metaphor in the game against the Rangers where the key game 5 or game 4, Messier went back to get the puck and he hooked Messier and stole it from him and scored on the empty net to seal the win. And people are like, that's the transition. It's now Gretzky and Messier out. This is now Lindros' league. And that's how he was covered. In Canada and in the U.S.
It's crazy with Lindros just because, like, I remember as a kid, I never got to see him, like, at his most dominant, but just, like, I saw him at the end of his career when he got to play for the Leafs, got to play for Dallas.
Different player.
Different player. But even then when he was a shell of himself, you would see certain things he'd do on the ice and be like, you know what? Like, this guy just had so much skill.
Listen, I'm telling you right now, he was so freaking good.
I remember my dad saying,
good. He was literally the best player in the game. He was the best player on the ice. You could not stop him.
No one since Gretzky could compare, I would say, right?
Well, Lemieux. Mario.
Lemieux, obviously, Lemieux,
Gretzky started showing signs of wear. So now Mario and Yager, this was when Yager transitioned into, and it became Yager versus Lindros. That's why I want the league to always promote those guys. You don't have to promote 75 guys and have every team. It's not like the All-Star format. Every team has to be represented. You find 5 to 10 guys and you say, these guys are the players of our generation. We're going to shove their faces in. Because that's how it was when I was growing up as a young
hockey.
That's
how you build the league and build new fans, though, right? When you see an exciting guy like that.
Yeah, it was Gretzky. It was Lemieux. And Yzerman to a degree, but it was and Messier was a big one, and that was pretty much it. Like everything was Wayne and Mario with a little bit of Messier, a little bit of Bork, but then it became Lindros and Yager, and that was it. So we need that. Sid and Ovechkin, that was great in retrospect. Now with McDavid,
you need the new crop,
Matthews, and now we're getting this freaking kid Bedard and Michkov, who
four to build around.
Yeah, all in the league at the same time, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think it's really important for the sport, and I think it's about time. And we were talking about Lindros the other day too, and I was saying that I was watching a highlight video of John LeClair having a 4-goal game.
Oh yeah,
and if you watch those highlights, the highlights are Eric Lindros.
He's just setting up LeClair for tap-ins.
Every single play, the play is created because of something Lindros did, where he beat 2 or 3 guys or hops around a guy, dekes through somebody, and all of a sudden, LeClair's there for the open shot. It's like that guy was a motor. If he existed today, he would still be the best player in the league.
Absolutely.
He would outplay McDavid, even though McDavid with his speed,
think about what Lindros.
Think about what he could have done after the lockout with the rules, right?
Well, with the elimination of, and Lindros was a dirty player, so I'm not going to say that he didn't have it coming to a degree, but if he played in this day and age, where you're literally not allowed to even hook anybody,
grab or hold anybody,
let alone grab a jersey or basically Velcro yourself to the hip,
would have been unstoppable.
Yeah, people say that about Lemieux and Gretzky. Yeah, of course, absolutely, but Lindros in that power game.
Yeah, because the power forward game,
Yeah, he would be ultimately win in my opinion, the Hart Trophy winner every year. He'd have every year. You just with his skill set. What hurt him was the health, the injury stuff. He loved to play rough. He loved to be physical.
He take a toll, obviously.
It took a huge toll on him, and because he was so hyped. He always had a target on his back, always, and he was cocky. You know, he wasn't.
I think too the being a flyer probably didn't help that. Like the whole identity thing. I got to be rough and tough. I'm sure that played into it too.
No. He was like that in junior high when he was like 14. Okay. No. The Lindros with Philly was the Lindros you saw. He was trucking dudes.
Okay.
Yeah, he was getting into bar fights. He was
No, it's literally like it's like you add Tom Wilson with McDavid. I mean, like you don't have a combination like that around the league where it's literally
not anymore.
Player in the league with Tom Wilson's attitude.
His brother was even tougher, but his brother had like 10 concussions, and he still was a first-round pick.
Immediately, the guy had right. He like came in and retired. In a few years?
Yeah. Brett, he was a top 10 pick, I think, in '95. Or 94 maybe.
Yeah, for sure.
Drafted him. They thought they were going to get another version, and he, because of the style of play, and so
catches up eventually.
Yeah. So that's why Flyers fans, especially the older fans, they're kind of scarred with the catastrophic news with their best plays, Pelly Lindbergh, Lindros, Pronger, like what it could have been. Yeah. You know what I mean? If let's say someone was like healthier.
Peter Forsberg too, his career ended here. I mean, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. But Forsberg was healthy. I mean, he would have. We don't really talk about him in like the top, let's say 25 conversation.
Man, his skill is unreal.
He would have
passing ability, like holy.
Yeah. The team where they're at right now, it would be nice if they had like a central figure, number one.
An elite talent, yeah.
Whether it's on defense or in goal or up front, you had for years, you just always had Giroux. You could defer to Giroux. And
they need that new figure almost, right? That new guy to kind of
Couturier, I guess it could still be that guy if he.
We got to see what happens with the injuries.
Actually, I do want to talk. I want to talk about this real quick as we wrap up here because we're going long. But I do want to talk about Couturier real quick because I brought this up on the episode, and we went through was it last week? I think Vasili went through the list of Selke winners.
Yeah,
and, I don't think the Flyer fans really appreciate how good Sean Couturier is.
No,
you don't win a Selke because you're just a good player in the league.
Because you're a great player.
Yes, it's because you are one of the best centers in the National Hockey League, typically, or an elite defensive player with an elite offensive ability as well to at least play against the best players in the league on a nightly basis.
And win those matchups.
Score over a point a game, close to it.
As an outsider of Philadelphia, do you view Sean Couturier as a number one center in the National Hockey?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Just wanted to make that clear to the.
Absolutely. And I think he's like a Kopitar or a Bergeron, where
our assessment eventually, as well, yeah.
Once he gets a little bit older and more wiser and more, he just understands the legal. And, remember, he was a very high pick. Yeah. So it wasn't like this was
supposed to go number one. They got mono that year.
Yeah. So it's not like this came out of nowhere. He was criticized this first couple of years, right? When's he going to show up? And then to deal with all that adversity and the criticism and the benchings and the demotions and different coaches, and then to blossom into this fantastic two-way play, one of the best in the league, and it's just that when you face the Flyers, you had to prepare for him, and that's what. Just by that alone,
you just said that. Do you know how many smart hockey? I'm sorry to cut you off, but you know how many smart hockey people I've heard say that the Flyers don't have a single player that you have to prepare for, and I'm like, that.
Bullshit.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
I mean, maybe not last point. Maybe not last year, but
it's just revisionist history, right? When you have a guy like Couturier, he's been out since December 26th of last season. People forget because they haven't seen him play, but he's the real deal.
They do it. They do it every time. And people are doing it again. When Claude Giroux was here, it was, he's not as good as the other guys, though, so he's not elite. Do you know how many times I had to defend that Claude Giroux? It was a joke. I used to just tweet it out for fun, like, Claude Giroux is elite, and watch people freak out at that statement. I'm like,
how old is Giroux now?
What is he, 34?
35, yeah.
A 34-year-old Giroux got a 3-year, $18 million deal.
Yeah.
A 34-year-old guy in this day and age, in a cap world. A 34-year-old player
that just shows exactly.
Just got a 3-year deal for $18 million, a $6 million AAV. All right. So if that doesn't say that he was at one point his playing career an elite player, I don't know what else does. I mean, you know, that was a like half that contract was purely reputation, right?
Totally.
Purely reputation, because you know you're not going to get, you know, you might not get, at least, I mean, with the way, if he's playing with Stutzland to brink at, he might hit 80 points again.
I think he might, to be honest. They're looking good in the preseason.
Yeah. So, and the other, that's another feather in Couturier's cap, is that he had to, you know, develop into this kind of player and have this role with the Flyers already established in certain positions, in certain forward positions. And so he didn't have to be the best player on the team, but he eventually became the best player, at least the most effective player on the team.
Yes.
And eventually one of the top scorer on the team.
Yeah.
So what more do you want? What more do you want?
That's exactly my point.
Any other fan base, if he plays for any other fan base, that fan base is like, he's our number one center.
Thank you.
It's just the team's been bad, and when the team's bad, you know, things come out of the woodwork.
Look, just so you're aware, you know, I'm sure you don't listen to all that. Like, it was a very regular statement that this team doesn't have a number one center, that Ivan Provorov is a second pairing defenseman. Like, the amount of ridiculous statements I see people make just because they panic over losing. Like, I get it, but that's not a mature way to go about this at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's what they,
my opinion.
Couturier doesn't have, I guess, the presence, for lack of a better term, that like
the dynamic skill that you see.
Yeah, like a number one center. But again, like, you know, what helped
hockey sense, his positioning, it makes up for it.
What really helped Kopitar's reputation were the cups. All right, and the Kings don't win those cups without the likes of Quick and freaking Drew Doughty and, you know, Gaborik and, you know, Dustin Brown, and the list goes on and on. Jeff Carter, right? Yeah. Mike Richards, you know, so you know, when Kopitar won those cups, now we're like, oh my God, this is like the number one awesome all-star center. And I think Couturier, if he was on a team that actually had more success, he had a better supporting cast,
get more respect,
get more credit, and you bolted and almost like force people to make him the face of the franchise. You see him on the billboard, you see him in the commercials, you see him on the cover of EA Sports. You know, if they ever came down to that, like, you know what I mean. So
I think that would have happened this year if he started off healthy again. I think he's wearing the C. We're having a different conversation. To your point, I think he
can get back. I
just hope he does whatever he needs to do. Take as much time as he needs.
Especially with the back.
He could, if he's got to take 2 years off, take 2 years off. You know, players have done it before, to make sure that he heals up properly, because he's still a young guy. He's only 29, right?
Yeah, still plenty of time. Yeah.
So he could have, and the fact that he's so good defensively and good on faceoffs, that he'll always have a job in the league.
That's what I said when he signed the contract.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't get it. If you want to criticize him, be my guest. I out of respect, and again, part of that is where he came from. That he was criticized and he shut people. So if he did it once before, he could do it again.
I love that. That's a perfect way to end this episode. Steve, what do you got that you're working on? I know I said about the episodes. Obviously follow you on Twitter and, you know, YouTube, but go ahead. You got anything upcoming?
No, just I got to finish up the team preview. So tomorrow is Minnesota and Los Angeles, and then I got to work all the way down to in Anaheim. So that takes up all my time. You know, it's like usually most of the research is done, but I have to brush up on watching games in training camp and see what roster, because I'm predicting lineups, so I want to see if my predictions, how close they are, and then make the adjustment to say, okay, this guy is going to be in the AHL and so on. So just busy that, and then once the season starts, I'm going to go and kick my feet up and watch as much draft eligible prospects as I can. I have a whole queue of games that I got to catch up on the Champions League that's been going on, and I'll do Mondays Prospect Expressway on the podcast, Friday NHL Interlude. So the big stories in the NHL. Usually what I do is I just watch games and then I'll talk about it. That's pretty much it. So like if I watch So I'm going to do that with the Flyers this year. I'll have Flyer-centric podcasts just on my own, in addition to the ones that I get invited to. So, just keep tabs and we'll see how the season goes. I don't know.
It'll be interesting. There's a lot to unpack, I think.
Yeah. Like the disappointment, I think, from not being a playoff team will eventually, subside and
look towards the future. Yeah.
The lottery. And then that's when I know I'll be getting a text message from Yariv and saying, hey, draft, let's talk draft. So I'll be ready.
Hell yeah.
Awesome.
Hell yeah. And we're going to skip the comments thing for this week just because we're like over 2 hours, but we'll get back to it next week. Just so you guys are aware. Steve, at the end of the episodes, we're starting to read people's comments in the YouTube videos. So we will get back to that. I just don't want to continue for like another 30 minutes for now. We're already past 2 hours. Vasili, you got anything that you want to tell people about?
I'll just most likely have an article out some point this week. Probably kind of recap training camp, maybe my predictions for who's going to make the team, things like that. So keep an eye out for that on Flyers Nitty Gritty. And thanks to everybody, for supporting and continuing to watch, listen to the podcast, all that stuff. We really appreciate all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you, Steve. Definitely make sure to check out his series. And yes, I definitely will be hitting you up again for more preview stuff. And this one has gone really long. Really appreciate you coming on. Again, guys.
No problem.
Thanks again, buddy. Again, keep the comments coming. I will be going back to that next week. So apologies for this week, but we will get, I was worried that this one was going to go super long anyway. But we'll get back to the comments. Again, like, subscribe, share. Shout out to Gym Steaks. They are not open yet. I will announce when they're open, but shout out to Gym Steaks for when they are open. Go back to their cheesesteaks. And again, we love you. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for everything. And remember, always stay gritty.